What unsupervised childhood activities did you participate in that probably should have killed you? Swimming in the drainage canal by my house. Barbed wire. Horses. Concrete. Fertilizer runoff, etc. My cousins and I, from the time we were toddlers, were just sent out into the forest in the morning with nothing but whistles to scare the bears. One time I chased a bear. We used to dig tunnels through the hay that they stored in the barn that would be like 10 meters high in places. The tunnels would regularly collapse and we'd just shrug it off and dig another. Quite the same activity but with snow. Few times in news I've read about child suffocating into a tunnel they made that collapsed. Climbing trees way too high. When I was a kid, we used to toss apples under the tree, climb the tree, and when the horses that my grandparents raised would come to eat the apples, we would leap on the horses. Most of the time the horse would buck and take off running with a kid on its back. How are you alive? This is nuts. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. So that slogan became common. But apples didn't always have a wholesome reputation. In the 19th century you were most likely to consume one in the form of apple cider or brandy. They also didn't taste like modern apples. They were bitter. Johnny Appleseed planted orchards for cider as the country expanded, not just cause gosh shucks apples is dandy. It also allowed him to claim the land he planted was settled and cultivated, so he could claim the land and resell it. As the temperance/prohibition movement gathered steam, apple growers needed to market their product, so they latched onto this phrase and also bred sweeter apples. We used to play with chemicals in my neighbor's garage. Like combine all different kinds of chemicals we could find. I would assume lawn care and car chemicals. In her garage into a hole in the cement floor. At least we were smart or lucky enough to keep the garage door open. My greatest discovery at around 12 years old doing that was finding out brake fluid and chlorine for the pool combust when mixed. Soon my friends and I were doing all kinds of crazy s with the mixture. The best was driving a pipe into the ground a few feet long and putting the chlorine and brake fluid in there and watching the dragon fire shoot out the pipe. It's not an immediate reaction. Kind of a slow burn till it bursts into a furious hellfire. Oh man, I could write a book about it. Growing up in the Rust Belt and playing in the industrial relics, I'm still surprised I'm somehow alive. Plus my buddy's grandpa was a gunsmith, so we had black powder. You can imagine what we did with that. Also swimming in the river and effing around by the train tracks. Yeah. I don't know how I even still have all my OEM fingers and toes. I grew up in Kigali, Rwanda. After the 1994 genocide there were landmines all over the place. We used to walk to our primary school, about 1.5 kilometers. As kids we used to play soccer on the street while walking to school. So one day the ball fell in the bush as always, and I went for it. Little did I know that the stone-like thing under the ball was a notorious landmine. I got the ball and I asked the other older kid what it was. 10 minutes later the entire neighborhood was on site talking about how I just cheated death. Never will I ever forget it. If I stepped on the mine that afternoon, I wouldn't be writing this today. I grew up within the boundaries of Tufts University's campus. At the end of my street was a campus building that was 6 stories high. I remember climbing to the top of the fire escape, stepping over the railing onto the slate-pitched roof. I held onto the dormer and made my way on top of that roof. Then I would walk up to the pitch of the roof and straddle the pitch and look out on the Boston skyline. I was under 10 years old, well over 100 feet up. One slip and I was sidewalk pizza. I can't believe I survived being a latchkey kid in the 80s. We did the same thing on the roof of main building at Vassar in the 80s. I'll bet they've got all access to the roof closed off now. A friend and I also fenced there on the catwalk. We were college students, so no excuse for stupidity. They did close it off. Didn't someone take LSD and jump off around the 80s? Is ARP a ghost? The Great Rock Wars. In grade school we played this during recess. We just whipped pebbles at each other. Hard. Also, I pay homage to my fallen 4th grade friend. May we never forget you. We left a lot of good men behind on that playground. Apostrophe. I can still see little Jimmy. He caught a rock right in the cheek. The school nurse did what she could. but he was finished. He went home too soon that day, apostrophe. Previous owner of my childhood home left a bunch of random chemicals in the garage. He was into home improvement and stuff, and my siblings tool to playing mad scientist. Several instances of unknown gases spreading through the garage later, and we are still around. Let's play Breaking Bad. Lawn darts. Except no one was throwing em at the rings. Nope, toss em straight up in the sky and scatter. Lol, we played scattered darts too. At the 80s/early 90s. We had a mini crossbow we'd put full size arrows in and shoot it straight up and basically play chicken. I used to have free reign in the woods behind the base housing at Fort Bragg. My friends and I would ride our bikes through the woods for hours in the summer at the tender age of 7, like it wasn't a big deal. I'd never let my 7-year-old now wander around the woods like that nowadays. One day we found a vine that was dangling next to a ravine and do a Tarzan Juno across it. It was probably a good 30-foot drop to the bottom of a pit filled with jagged rock and dubious puddles of ike. I wasn't supposed to show my parents, but I did one day and they freaked out and cut it down. My friends were mad at me for like a minute until they all agreed it was indeed incredibly dangerous and for the best. Perhaps the most logical conclusion I have ever seen kids come to in my life. Me too. But at Fort Meade, I'd dug out forts in the banks of ditches and homemade firecrackers to kill invading yellow jacket nests. Can't imagine which WWI and second era chemicals were buried in those woods. In the 50s and 60s you could get chemistry sets complete with a vial of mercury and other dangerous chemicals. Man, it was fun playing with that mercury and mixing various chemicals to see what would happen. Next we'll talk about the wood burning set and the toy that came with a cauldron to melt metal and pour it into molds to make soldiers and whatnot. All while mom was upstairs fixing dinner. Growing up in the 90s, we basically lived at our local park, and there was a foundation still there from the 60s of an old toilet block which had been blown up by my dad when he was a kid. Growing up in a family that hunted, it wasn't uncommon to find 22 bullets in the garage or in hunting bags. My brother would take bullets that he found, place them on a log, and then smash them with a hammer. Luckily he outgrew that phase. I hate to be a one-upper, but we would do something similar with 22 and shotgun shells. We were preteens, owners of Red Ryder BB guns, and unsupervised rounds of ammunition. We would get bored at plinking cans, birds, and squirrels. So we lined up shotgun shells and 22 rounds and shot them with our BB guns. We would routinely have to dodge the 22 casings shooting back at us after we hit the primer. Looking back on it, I'm really surprised none of us were seriously injured. Back in the old days, when folks didn't lock doors, my dumber used to go in my neighbors' houses and wander about while they slept. Then I'd get scared and leave. Very dangerous as a 6-year-old young lady. Edit. It was 1994. My parents were asleep and I was stealthy. It was maybe the same 425 family houses on my block and I never got caught. I have many angels. Fire. Lots of fire. I almost burned down the house in Mexico when I was like 8. I set a fake plant on fire and ran away. Mom was cooking next door and put the flames out. In the US I burned a hole in the carpet in my room when I was in middle school. Covered that up with small pink carpet. Parents never found out until I moved out. My brother and I would bend our mattresses in half and then sit on them, release them and fling ourselves across the room into the wall. We were not bright children, but damn did we have fun. That sounds awesome, I'm gonna try that one. You alive? Question mark? Playing on my grandma's house roof. An older house. Slates came off on their own. Edit. Once my cousin got stuck and my brother had to carry him down. It was so scary. Making snow forts. Fortunately my friend found my legs because I was panicking while suffocating. For a little bit it was a middle school fad to throw yourself off public buses as they were slowing down and do a roll on the sidewalk. I smacked my midsection on a telephone pole and had bruises for weeks lol. What, how did they allow that? Op didn't say it was allowed, only that it happened. Middle schoolers, ya know. I used to rollerblade off the roof and onto the trampoline. It hurts to think about it now. I'm still shocked I never got hurt. My backyard was lower than my front yard, so the back deck was 8 feet or so above the backyard. We would jump off onto the trampoline. Before paintball, we only had BB guns to shoot at one another. Needless to say, there weren't any fancy face masks or other protective gear. 40 years later, my parents were finally told the story of me using a pocket knife to remove the BB embedded in my kid brother's butt cheek. Setting everything on fire that I could get my hands on. I'm not a pyro, but I went through a phase when I was around 8 or 9 when I just lit S on fire. Books, paper bags, toy cars, lawn furniture, Legos, the park down the street, action figures, sticks and leaves, etc. It was just for a short time and I grew out of it, but that had real potential for disaster. One of the favorite places to hang out when I was a teenager was a disused railway bridge on the edge of the town. The land had begun to reclaim the top and was all overgrown, except for a small part in the center. There were amazing views of the town from there, and we used to head up there most summer evenings and relax with some smokes and alcohol. It was fairly well hidden from public and the police, so we used to get up to no good. One dude who was irritating enough used to tag along, as he was the younger brother one of the girls. He was sat on the 1-foot wall looking down at the stream below, and this lad grabbed him and dangled him over the edge. Was a pretty big drop down to the rocky stream underneath, maybe 30 feet. The dickhead let go of the poor lad's hand, so he grabbed the wall of the bridge. Then he let go of his other hand. Again, he clung onto the wall for dear life, then fell. Luckily, there was no serious damage, other than his soaked clothes. The lad who dangled him over didn't hang round with us after that. We made sure of it. Bottle rocket wars at close quarters. No glasses,